featured guest for today, Sister Jj Thames. What's going on?
Hey, how you doing, Doug?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. And thank you for your patience, because we don't usually rock like this. Can you dig it? Now, there's a lot going on with you. I've been hearing about you from so many people. It's so many organizations. You know, we can go on and on and on. And you are also coming to New York in August, correct?
That is true.
All right, so let's get down to it. The first thing I like to ask my guests is about their blues journey, right? Because you come from a blues city. You seem to be birthed in the midst of blues. Let's talk about your beginnings.
Well, ultimately, I'm only child of a preacher and a psychiatrist. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of jokes behind that. But I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, well, suburb of Detroit.
Okay.
I grew up there, went to Montessori school, started out musically there. They were the ones that basically told my parents that, you know, I had a gift and that they probably would do well nurturing it. So they did. And that's how the whole classical training started. I started at 9 years old.
Wow.
Went up until about 17, 18 was when I, continued to have private coaching, and I competed and all of different types of things. I was part of, city honors choirs, state honors choirs, national honors choirs, traveling choirs, things of that sort, solo ensembles, and did very well with that. And I started singing with my high school jazz band when I was about 15, 16. Started running that and being the vocalist for that, and competed with them as well. And that was really where about that time was when I really fell in love with jazz and blues. That's when I really started being exposed to it. I had been exposed to like Billie Holiday, when I was about 12 or 13, but it wasn't until I hit about my high school years that I really was delving into jazz and blues, and really, found a voice in that. And that's where it all really started.
Wow. So now, let's talk about your parents for a moment, because that's extremely interesting, at least to me, right? Because they're professionals. Please don't take what I'm about to say the wrong way, but based on the stereotypical story of blues people, it's just usually one story, but it doesn't seem like you're in that stereotypical story. You come from an affluent household, correct?
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely say that. Upper middle class upbringing. I was affiliated with a lot of the society organizations, Jack and Jill, and so forth. So, yeah, I don't have the original story that a lot of people do, and it gives me, I think, a different viewpoint and some texture that you don't normally hear.
Well, I must say, as someone on the outside, you do have a unique story, and you also have a story that is true to the African-American diaspora, or the African-American lineage that goes along with not only blues and blues people, but also it goes along with the story of our people, because there's more than one side to our story, and one side that gets neglected when it comes to musical performances and musical artists, to be specific, is that the educational upper middle class business owning black folk, which is part of the history, right? The what some would call the intellectual black folk, correct?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Agreed. And that's something that when I do different interviews and things, you get different responses. My father, before he became a full-time pastor, he was also an executive for General Motors. He started out as a security guard and ended up, in top management, and that was over the course of 36 years. So it's been a couple of times that, I've had stories printed and it said, she comes from a blue-collar fueled, General Motors car industry fueled background. And my dad would read it and he's like, that's not correct. And I'm like, I know, Dad. So I had to start correcting that.
Right.
It was an assumption, but that's not the truth.
Right. Because we're speaking about, executive in front of a name is not a small feat.
Right. No, it wasn't. And it really wasn't.
Especially at that time, right?
Not at all. I think he started out in maybe it had to be the 70s because he retired in 2003. So, and it wasn't a very easy journey for him. And, I remember seeing pins and, they would give all of these different accolades, as you pass these milestones of being with the company for so long. But he also receives pins and accolades for never missing a day and for, really never taking that much time off, so on and so forth. I mean, he always strove, he always was in stride for excellence, and I was taught excellence at a very young age.
Exactly. It is almost as if you knew where the segue was going, especially when you said the awards for never taking a day off and things of that nature. So my follow-up question to you was, is this what instilled your work ethic? Because you're putting in some work, sis.
Well, I mean, you got to work, but I was also always taught, preparation that meets opportunity is how you equate success. And so, and I was also taught, my father said to me on a daily basis that you can follow your dreams and whatever you put your mind to, you can do and you will do. And that, I always had their support. And now I will admit, their idea of me following my dreams was me becoming a doctor or that sort. An entertainer was not what they wanted me to do. And we did have some headbutting going on there for a while. My father grew up in the Jim Crow period, during in Virginia, Emporia, Virginia. And so he's got a lot of great stories about that and what he experienced going to jail for not getting off of the sidewalk when two police officers approached him.
Wow.
He said that there was more than enough room to go around, so he went to jail. My grandmother ran, illegal business. She was illiterate. She couldn't read. She couldn't write, but she could count. And so she ran a successful joint, which also served as a boarding house for many, many blues and jazz and blues artists during that time, the 40s and 50s, because, as you know, they weren't allowed to stay in the hotels.
Exactly.
In exchange for a free set. So she got free entertainment. They got a free place to stay, some, corn liquor and a fish plate and, a girl or guy, depending on what their preference was.
There was a lot going on in them places.
Yeah, but hey, it's supply and demand, right?
Absolutely. See, now, you have such a wealth of our tradition ingrained in you, right? From your grandmother, because we share that in common. Most of the folk that comes out of our heritage share that in common. Great with math, not a really great reader, but was able to make a living and pass down certain qualities and moral codes. Then now you have your father, who's a reverend, hardworking man, a man of integrity, and obviously one who does not back down, right? Now I can tell based on the performances I've watched you do that all these things are ingrained in you, from the juke joint to the hustler spirit to the not back down, the whole spiel. But you mentioned something I wanted to get into, so I have to go back to that, because considering the the stature of your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Usually in situations like that, there is a conflict when it comes to, daddy, whether it's the son, Pop, I want to sing, or the baby girl, daddy, I want to sing, and I want to sing the blues at that. What could we talk about? What was that like when you broke to them that I don't want to go into the medical profession. I want to do this full time.
Well, I was young when I did that, actually. I was 18. And actually, I was approached when I was 15 in the grocery store by an A&R for Warner Brothers. And so
wow.
Through this, and I dressed really eclectic and all of that type of stuff. I was encouraged to be myself. And so that would wear a tutu with some combat boots and I had an afro and a dashiki,
I dig it. That's you painted a great portrait right there. We know where you stand, and I love it. Go ahead.
Right. So I stuck out in a lot of places that I went. So it was a gentleman walked up to me, and I was looking through jazz CDs at a place called Meyer 50 Acres, and I know it's not everywhere, but it is prevalent in the the Midwest. And so I was waiting for my mother who was grocery shopping, and I was going through all these CDs and all of that, and this guy kept looking at me, and I kept thinking, creeper, like this old, he kept looking at me, and so I was starting to get nervous, like I don't want him to snatch me and take me away or something, So he asked me a question. He said, "What do you know about jazz?" And so I started naming off stuff. Of course, I was a smart aleck, know-it-all, teenager, so naming off stuff, and he just kind of looked at me and was a little impressed, and he said, "So you sound like, I'm listening to you talk, you sound like you sing." And he's like, "Sing something for me." And I always was taught by my vocal coaches that you always have a song prepared.
Mm.
And so the song that I had prepared always was either My Funny Valentine or it was Until the Real Thing Comes Along by Billie Holiday.
Mm.
So I started singing that. And he, I got through the first couple stanzas, and he stopped me. He's like, "Stop. Take me to your mother." And I'm looking at him, what's going on? And so we, go and I do the whole traditional thing, where you're in the grocery store looking for your mom. So you're kind of going from aisle to aisle, looking down each aisle.
Right.
Finally found her, and I'm walking up, and so you have this guy in a suit and all that walking behind me. And she's looking like, "What did you do now?" And he hands her a card. Now, mind you, I don't know who he is, but, he hands her a card, and it turns out that he's A&R for Warner Brothers. So
wow.
All of this stuff, and he starts giving me books and, things about the music business and Barry Gordy and, things to learn and to listen to. And he started testing me on the music business when it came to, stuff like publishing and all of that. And he was like, one thing that you have to know is the music business is 90% talent. 90% business and 10% talent. You have the talent, but you got to know this business.
Absolutely.
He really helped me understand that. Now, don't get me wrong. I was 15, so, I'm still learning the business, honestly. But I did have a good foundation, though. And long story short, my dad listened to them. And at that point in time, this was the time that you had Beyonce, you had Brandy, Monica, I'm in that same age group.
Right.
They wanted to, the year before, this was 2006, so the year before, just a few months before, actually, Phyllis Hyman had committed suicide.
Wow, that's right.
Phyllis Hyman was one of the people that people tend to say that I look like or sing like, sound like, so on and so forth. And, I'm a larger frame woman and, I'm jazz trained and so on and so forth, so I can see how people see that. But
you're a black woman that can sing. I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. Go ahead.
You said it, not me. So basically, what Warner Brothers wanted to do was to reinvent Phyllis Hyman.
Mm.
And my dad was like, "First of all, you're not about to reinvent my child after someone who killed herself."
Smart man.
He said they also wanted him to sign over. At that point, they were kind of doing these developmental deals still. It was like, some of the last ones that they were doing.
Right. Before the independent label deals destroyed that.
Yeah.
which destroyed music to me. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Agreed. And aspects, agreed. But basically, they wanted you to kind of sign over your rights, your parental rights to the label so that they could kind of mold you and be able to take you in and out of countries and, had different things that they wanted you to sign away. And so my dad was
interesting.
I'm going to raise my daughter, not you. And ultimately, when she turns 18, if she decides she wants to do this, then she's more than welcome to. But until then, she's going to stay in my household. She's going to go to school. She's going to get her education, and that's what's going to happen. So we walked away from that deal. And, of course, I was livid from, But once I turned 18, of course, I remember that promise. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Well, by that point in time, I had become a single mother. I had a child. And my parents moved down south so that my father could retire from General Motors and become a full-time minister. So they were in the process of doing that move, and my father was kind of phasing out of his position and all of that.
Right.
And so I had planned on going to New York. I was going to Sarah Lawrence. I had a full ride there and all of that. And but the baby and all of that, my mom was like, nope, you got to come down south with us. So that's how I ended up in Mississippi. And was just kind of thrown into the music industry down there. I mean, the blues industry just kind of engulfed me. I mean, within months, I was singing backgrounds for Peggy Scott Adams and
wow.
And all this craziness. Just kind of fell into it.
Right.
And,
wow.
Okay with that, but they were not okay with me not going to college and not furthering my education. It was kind of like, okay, that's a hobby, and yeah, it's paying you a little bit right now, and that's cool. But when it came down to where I was like, no, I'm going to, or Mama, I want to sing.
Right, which is a great play, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. That's when it became a really big problem. Issue at that point. And it was just kind of like, look, that's a dead-end, career. My mother was like, that's a pipe dream. There's millions of other people that want to do what you're trying to do, what makes you so special. It was kind of rough, and so we went back and forth for a while. And even though they were not supportive, they were, because it was like I would have tour and they would watch my son.
Right.
But on the other hand, it was kind of like they verbally were saying, this is not what you need to do with your life. You need to find something else to do, And a lot of times my dad kind of stayed quiet, but my mother was more the vocal one about that. So,
right. Right, because mom doesn't want to see her daughter, maybe what she believes, waste her life and get hurt. But daddy knows what he instilled, so it's kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, dad was just trying to keep the peace,
Yeah, I do know, because I'm a daddy and a husband.
We get it. He was trying to keep the peace. He had his opinions, yes, but it was more so he had always told me that, you can do whatever you put your mind to and we'll support you. But my mom, not so much. She was not really happy about it. And it really wasn't until maybe a few months before she passed away that my godmother came to town and drug her out to one of my shows. I was performing 4 nights a week at the Hilton Hotel. And she was like, I want to see my goddaughter perform. I want to see her. And I remember my mother sitting there with tears in her eyes. And, my godmother telling her, look, she's really doing this. She actually can do this. So my mom, before she died, she did get an opportunity to really see me. I mean, not in the capacity now where I'm traveling all over the world and all that type of stuff and have albums out, but she was able to see me in my element. So.
Right. See, she was able to see you and say, wow, this is real. Yeah. She was able to see it at that point. And I think that she kind of, had some peace about it at that point. So, and was able to give you her blessing.
Oh, I don't know about a blessing. But, my mother was a very a beautiful, astute, very intelligent, stoic, strong woman. So, her giving me her blessing wasn't going to happen. But as far as her, you could see that she was touched and she was moved. And, talking to my godmother now, of course, that was one of her best friends. So they had their conversations, but she would tell me. So, and she was proud. And that's, I carried that with me.
Right. That's really what counts.
Right.
I dig it. And now, believe it or not, because just the fact of you earlier on stating that you did not think that you had the blues story, but you actually do, and you know, not. I hate the fact that I have to make a disclaimer when I say this, but the blues story is the black story, because this is what happens in most of our households. This is like a tradition, and I want to know if, your father being a pastor, did that play a part in him not fully committing to you singing secular music?
Actually, no. Not at all. My father, because of his upbringing, because, you know, he grew up in a juke joint / whorehouse.
Right.
And then he left his mom's house when he was 14, 15, and he lied and upped his age and went into the military and then went to the Navy and all that type of stuff. And he saw so much and experienced so much and was around music and was around musicians and so on and so forth. His desire for me not to go into music really had nothing to do with secularism. It had nothing to do with that. What it really was about was that he saw traditionally that black people were only limited to a certain amount of careers.
Right.
One of them being an entertainer, or, you know, as he calls it, footballer.
A footballer?
A footballer.
Is that another term, colloquialism for Sambo?
I did. If it is, then that's a new one on me. I thought he was talking about a athlete, but
okay. No, I'm not even trying to be funny, because you know, again, we're going to go into another. We're going to go to your music currently in a moment, but your story is your music, at least to me, and
completely.
Just because, you know, my family, there's men in my family that remind me of your father, and they raised my mother, and she sang and played cello for a long time, wasn't interested in me doing music professionally, but thought I should do something else because of not only the treatment of our people, but we're able to offer more. Not that especially what you bring to the world as a vocalist is humongous. But at that time, you know, if you wasn't singing and dancing, you know, white people really didn't care. And, you know, you couldn't get a job, you know, in some cases. But in other cases, there were places that had affluent black folk that owned businesses, like New York and different places like that. So this is really interesting because your lineage leading you up to this point right now is our story. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, and that was a dynamic in my household. My father, you know, like I said, came from, my grandfather was Native American and my grandmother was multicultural. And so they had a hard time because they really didn't belong in the black culture, but they didn't really belong in the white culture either. But she was able to kind of fit. My grandfather died from a heart attack. My mother was left with 14 children to figure out how to take care of them all by herself. So that's where the juke joint came in. You know, that was really the only thing she could do. And her thing was, I'm not cleaning up behind anybody.
That's right.
That was her personality, and that was her viewpoint. And so, I mean, she had to find something, so she chose to basically give people a good time. You know?
That's right.
So he grew up seeing all of that. Now, my mother, on the other hand, her parents. Well, my grandmother was also a pastor, and my grandfather, you know, not he was in the church, of course, and as a pastor too, but she actually was the pastor of a church. Also was a big deal during that time frame, you know.
Right.
Then my grandfather owned a asphalt company, and
wow.
Basically it became one of the largest asphalt companies in Michigan. And later on in the South, and most of the highways that were paved in Michigan, Ohio, so on and so forth, were paved by my grandfather, which was a minority company, so that was a big feat during that time.
Humongous.
So my mother's family was more affluent, whereas my father's was not. So, I mean, I just had so many different dynamics in my family, you know, from my upbringing and seeing so many different aspects. And my parents chose to raise me a certain way and, you know, expose me to things like that. I traveled all over the world as a little girl. And, you know, we went to the symphony and we went to the opera and we went and saw plays. And, you know, I mean, so I just was exposed to a whole lot.
I mean, that's beautiful. And that just reminds me of a lot, you know, and another time, we're not going to talk about it today, but I want to bring you back on a cultural tip and discuss why you separate Native American and Black folk. But we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that your listeners can definitely Google that. There's plenty of information out there. Absolutely.
But, you know, because, and that's based on my personal, what I know personally from family and then from what I study. But there's just like everybody, there's so many different facets of people. So I get it. Now, let's talk about your work. Now we just set up what makes you as a human being, because that's what's more important, at least to me, right? Now, and for those of you just tuning in, first and foremost, what's wrong with you? This is Jack Dapper Blues on WFDU HD2. We are speaking with our featured guest, Jj Thames, and she's about to talk to us about her latest album, her writing and studio and performance techniques, and maybe a couple of secrets. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so let's talk about the album.
Well, my most recent record, which is Raw Sugar, which came out in August of last year, so it's almost a year old, and we are getting ready to actually just start touring it. And we have some shows this upcoming weekend in Florida, and then we start out June 9th, heading up to Chicago Blues, and then we're heading to the West Coast. And I mean, we are actually just kind of keeping straight through for the rest of the year between here and Europe. So I'm really excited about that, getting an opportunity to get out in front of people. And we are going to be in New York. We'll be there August 8th at Joe's Pub at the Public Theater. And then we'll also be back in November. I don't want to lie about the date. I want to say it's November 9th, but I could be wrong. Website, it's there, but we'll be at BB King's Blues Club. So,
both great venues, very great venues.
Yes, I feel very blessed, and I have a very awesome team that is putting me where I need to be. So I'm really thankful for that. But the record Raw Sugar came out. It's on the Champ and Malico Records, which Malico, if your listeners are not familiar, is a historical label.
That's right.
And basically, you're talking about Dorothy Moore, who is one of my huge supporters and one of my mentors, and a woman that I revere and just look up to. She's so amazing, so sweet, so humble. She's awesome. But she's based out of Jackson, Mississippi, and her big hit, Misty Blue, Malico Records. You have Johnny Taylor.
That's right.
Phil, you have, I mean, there's so many people that come out of Malico Records, and I'm honored to be, you know, in that family at this point. But Raw Sugar was about my divorce. For 11 months. And then it was a very volatile marriage. There's a lot wrong with it, very dysfunctional. I know the people they basically try to figure out the guys put it back nicely. It was really bad. So Raw Sugar was about that. The name Raw Sugar came out of basically it's me talking about that. It's a time where when you go through a really volatile breakup, you have a choice as a woman. And I don't know if all women go through this, but I know as I talk to the women I know, there's a time where you're angry and you're bitter and you're tired and all these different things, and you have a choice.
Right.
Take that anger and that bitterness and that ball of fury on the inside of you, and you can take that out on every man that you ever meet from that point on.
Absolutely. I mean, vice versa. It goes for men as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, or you can take that bitterness and that anger and all of that, and you can refine it and use it to bolster your character and look and understand what you will not tolerate and what you will not do again. Learn from it and move on. And so on my record, I wrote about that moment of looking at yourself and saying, okay, which way do I want to go? Wrote Raw Sugar, and I'm talking about who she is. I mean, and the first line is Dream Wrecking with Jezebel. Check you into the Heartbreak Motel. She's a black widow. You know, you fall in love with her, you've basically lost your soul.
Wow.
Pregnant woman leaving nothing but carcasses behind and essences. And, you know, the next song on the record is I Want to Fall in Love. So it was like, okay, I wrote about where I was and being this angry, vengeful woman. And do I want to spread that or do I want to spread love? And the last song on the record was my choice, which is I Want to Fall in Love. So this all about my experience. I've got a song in there called I'm Leaving. I've got Woman Scorn. I've got Bad Man. I've got these different things. And I'm just going through. I wrote through my pain. I wrote through my confusion. I wrote through all of that. And in the end, the very last track is I Want to Fall in Love Again. And so I'm happy to announce and that I have found that. And
congratulations.
Thank you. And so things are pretty good, and I'm happy, but I had to go through that process. I had to make that decision that was not what I wanted to do with my life.
Absolutely. And it sounds very therapeutic.
All of my music is that way. I mean, even if you go back to, and I feel like that's what music should be. I feel like music should be honest. I know some people are entertainers and they just write, you know, for other people or write from looking at other people's experiences, looking from the outside,
right?
From observing. All of my songs are written from my actual experiences. If you look at my first album, that was more so written about my journey to here. And, you know, we talked about my parents and all of that and them not being too happy about my choices. And so at one point in time, I broke away from their money. That was like me being on my own for the very first time.
Right, independent. Or as Janet Jackson said, in control.
Right. That was not fun. In that, I experienced, homelessness. I experienced being evicted. I experienced messing up my credit. I experienced sleeping on trains and busking in New York City on West 4th.
Wow.
I experienced all of that. And it wasn't because my parents cut me off. It was because I cut myself off from them because they didn't agree with what I wanted to do. Right.
You made a decision.
Yeah, and you had that thing saying, I can do it on my own. I don't need your money. I don't need you, that type of thing. And yeah, that was hard. That was rough. And but I figured it out. I did. And now I'm here, and I'm glad that I have that experience because I definitely can identify with more people. And, more when someone says, man, I got to go work this job that I hate, but I got kids and my life's going to be turned off if I don't. I really do know what that is. I can sing blues about that.
Absolutely. I want to ask you why you decided to name the album Raw Sugar. Is there something behind that?
Raw Sugar. Well, basically, I eat clean and all of that good stuff, and I'm a vegan, and so I do pay attention to how food is processed and, worked and so on and so forth. And something about sugar, when you refine sugar, a lot of times it's pulled through bone char and all of these different things. It's you remove all of the impurities out of it, and, it's white or it can be brown, but,
right.
You are bringing it into a refined period of being in good use, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
At raw sugar for what it is. It's chunky. It's got large crystals. It has not been refined. It's still sweet, but it's not as pretty. And so I chose that terminology, raw sugar, and part of the song, Raw Sugar, I say there's nothing about her refined. Point in time, I was raised where I did, I learned how to curtsy and how to walk with a book on my head, and, to make sure that I had proper, that I was standing properly and
posture,
and I learned how to set, proper tables and how to properly greet individuals and introduce people. And
so you're a real life Southern belle. Is this what you're saying?
Yes. If I was trained that way, debutante and all that good stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So to be in that space where I was leaving all of that refinery, where you're just so angry, and to where you're taught not to throw things and raise your voice and all of that, and you finally get into a place in your life where you're just you're in a primal rage and anger. You leave all that refined behind, and you have to be true and honest with yourself. And so that was me painting an actual portrait of what I had become after that divorce. And Raw Sugar.
I hear it. I dig it.
At the core, but yeah, I had a bunch of layers of unrefined stuff that I had to pull through the bone char. I had to, to get it back together and become the best version of myself again. Right.
Understood. Totally understood. So now my next question is, I wanted to ask your writing process, but in the description of your life, for that matter, I believe, I would hope the audience has a sense of your writing process. But if you want to break it down into technical terms, and when I say technical terms, these life experiences that you have, and then you want to discuss it in music. You want to talk to your audience about, hey, this is what's going on with me. How do you set this up? Do you reflect on a moment, or is it like as soon as it happens, you're like, I'm just going over here and I'm writing. Leave me alone. How does this work?
It really. I am. My boyfriend jokes with me all the time, and he, playfully makes fun of me. I am genuinely an artist, like through and through, 100%. So when it comes down to it, I think in lyrics. I move in them. I can be walking down the street and a melody hits me, or like a lot of my songs I have a song called Leftovers. I was sitting on the side of the bed putting on lotion, and the melody hit me, and I started writing the words. Bad Man, I wrote while I was hollering and screaming and crying in the shower, and it started out as a dirge, and I started kind of like doing this whole Baptist back and forth song, call and response thing, and that's how I wrote the song.
Wow.
I was really just kind of pouring out my soul and how I felt and what I was going through at the time, and I was just singing it out and not really worrying about, whether or not it rhymed or whatever. But eventually I sang it so much, and I sang it over and over and over again, to where I got out the shower and I wrote it down, and I had it.
Wow.
And it's actually one of those songs that everywhere I go now, people ask me to perform. So
absolutely, that has to have such an emotion and passion in a live performance based on how it organically was birthed.
Right. And I remember I have a song called Plan B, Abortion Blues, which basically is about going to the clinic and your boyfriend really wants you to have an abortion, and you change your mind. And
wow, that's deep. And that's actually, I'm sorry, go ahead, because that's something that rarely spoken about, but happens very often. Go ahead.
Right, and in the lyrics, I'm saying, it's early. It's a lifetime too early. Lord, you gave him to me. Who am I to be to give him back to you early? So it was about my youngest son, because I was planning on having an abortion. His father really wanted me to have one, and I got to the clinic and I sat there and I looked and I said, you know what? I don't think this is what I need to do. And I didn't. And he's 7 now. So, and at the beginning of the song, I have a voicemail recording of him saying, hello, Mommy, this is Israel. I love you.
Right.
And it's a song that I've gotten so much feedback about. People are just like, you wrote this and you're not judgmental in it and so on and so forth, and it really touched me and I love it. And I have some radio stations that actually play it, and I didn't know if people were going to play it or not. And honestly, just being honest with you, I didn't care.
I dig it. I hear that. And it should be spoken about because there are so many young ladies to women that have that moment that a lot of people aren't even aware of.
Right. And I remember when I had my first son, and my dad was like, you keep your head up. You keep your head up because there's so many people out there. The difference is, that have been in the same situation as you. The difference is you chose to have your baby and they didn't. That's it. He's like, so, you got caught, they got caught. You chose to go through with having your child and they chose to have an abortion. He said, so you keep your head up. It's okay. You made this choice, you made this decision. Yes, it is a lifelong decision, but, you have the right to make that choice. And so I did, and so I just wanted, people to know, women to know, look, it's okay to make that choice. If you decide that you want to keep your child, keep your child.
That's right.
Worry about what other people have to say. If you have the conviction to keep your child, then please, by all means, do. But just be a good parent to that child.
Yeah, that's really the nut and bolts. Now, let me ask you this, right? We're coming down to the last 11 minutes, but man, you're a wonderful sister. Having the musical background and training that you do in writing your songs, do you take part in the composition of the music, the writing of the actual music?
Absolutely. Typically what ends up happening is when I write the song, I have a melody in mind. Mm-hmm. And I just go and sit down with amazing musicians, kind of sing it out to them, and I might beatbox a beat. They kind of take my interpretation, or a lot of times what I do is I'll sing it into my phone, and I'm singing bass lines and all types of stuff, humming, things like that. And then I'll go and sit down with them, and then they can, they take my idea, and we just kind of form it that way. So, or I can sit down with a musician, like, for instance, on Raw Sugar, I sat down with Eddie Cotton, who's also an amazing, blues artist. Mm-hmm. Some songs I told him, look, I want this feel. Like, I have a song called Hattie Pearl on this last record. And Hattie Pearl was about my Aunt Hattie, who used to take care of me when I was little. And I loved her because she was so real. She, did snuff, and she cursed like a sailor. She, really red bone lady with this short curly hair with gray eyes. And men used to come from all over the place, even in her older age. Like, these guys would come with flowers and all types of stuff. And she used to play music really, really loud. Like, it was at her house that I heard Stand By Me the first time. And she had old stereo cabinet systems that sat on the floor.
I remember those.
Yeah, they had like 15 down at the bottom. And so she would play it like with the doors open, with at the top of what it could be. And I used to just sit and look at her. And she had this gold tooth, and she used to make sun tea on the back porch. So amazingly Southern. She had this big Cadillac that this guy used to come by and wash all the time. And her name was Hattie Pearl, so he used to call her Miss Pearl. And he would come and wash it. And I'm like, so is that your boyfriend, Aunt Hattie? And she would just be like, baby, there's no such thing. She's like, he's a man that comes by and does what I need him to do. He's trying to earn my favor. And I was just looking at her like, but he's been doing it for years.
How long? That is super duper country. But, that's also a standard and a respect, right? Right,
yeah. So with that song, I came to him and I said, I want it to sound like Nutbush City Limits, which she reminds me of. And so he helped me, put that song together. And literally, the band was playing it at Malaco, and they had learned the music, and they were playing it, and I was writing it as I was recording it.
Wow.
And, I just knew it was about her, and it was the easiest song to write because I was just writing about my memories of this beautiful woman. So, and I try with each record to put a song that really reflects or gives honor to somebody that, I admire. So, my first record that was Ray Charles. I love Ray Charles.
Absolutely.
I believe I did his cover, but I did it more in a big band jazz type of arrangement. So, yeah, musically, it just depends. I don't have a formula. It's whatever feels good. You know, that's one thing that I believe in music. Do what feels good.
That's right.
All feel good to them. And that's what it's all about, making people feel good.
You said it, 100%. That's the blues right there.
The feeling.
Now, Malico Records. So now you are like working in their studio. This is not like you record with your band and then you bring the recordings there, or you just say, okay, we're done. Do what you do. You guys, along with them, have this old school, so to speak, structure of what not just the music business, but recording is, right?
Yeah, like what happens is, my musicians, we come into the studio, we set up in a circle, and we record all together. I actually sing while they're recording all together, looking at each other and taking cues, and so it has this live feel. Live. And then what I'll come back and, if there's some songs that you hear the original vocals, some of them I come back and fix them because, I got a little carried away or it just wasn't, structurally sounding good enough for wax or, for a record.
Right.
But, yeah, for the most part, you're hearing that live magic. And I take that from Ray Charles because that's what he did.
That's right.
If you remember the movie, where, one of his background singers, she's like, I've never done a song in one take before.
That's right.
That's what I aspire to do, to be able to get the song down in one take, to where there's so much magic and everything is just so on point and everybody knows their part and we are flowing together that you capture it and you don't have to do it over again.
The connection.
Want to do, right. Now, have yet to do that. I aspire to.
Well, it probably happened, but it's funny because in this day and age, with the different medium of recording and the different medium of the consumption and listening of recording, it makes people less conscious of that feeling you're discussing and more conscious of having the sound perfect. Right.
Yeah, well, I will say that actually it was my boyfriend he's also a recording artist and for about 20 years now. And one of the things that he told me, I would go in the studio with him and he's like, oh, leave it. And I'm like, but it's not perfect. Like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. He's like, no, leave it. You want to hear some imperfections on a record. And when it comes back out of mixing, you're like, wow, that really was cool,
Right. Because you're feeling a human experience. That's just human.
Yeah, but if you listen back at, for instance, I know for a fact, Frankie Beverly, I hear some mistakes that they have left in their records, and I wouldn't change them for the world.
Absolutely. We can go from Frankie Beverly and the Maze to James Brown to Howlin' Wolf to, I would even say, my most favorite vocalist of all time, the David Ruffins. And it's not necessarily a mistake. It's just his imprint, his imperfection that was perfect because it was him.
Well, for instance, when I said that, I was thinking amazing Frankie Beverly, and it's what is it? The what's the name of that song? Something time of day. The Golden Time of Day. Right. There's a part in that song where the music just opens up and it breathes, and they're just kind of grooving. Keys where there's this one key strike, and you can tell it was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to be on purpose. It's so perfect. And so and they left it. And and if you look at the history and you listen to I read a lot of autobiographies and biographies and things of that sort, and you listen to them talk about how they messed up on this record and they left it and became their biggest hit and all this other type of stuff. And I just feel like, music is messy and we should leave it that way sometimes, Now, if you have something that's just all completely off key or something like that, obviously, Right. If it's something that wasn't necessarily supposed to be there, but it works, leave it alone.
No, I hear it. And I agree. And I have to say it was an honor to have you as a guest and to sit down and talk about your blues and your journey with the blues.
Well, thank you very much. And again, it was an absolute pleasure being here with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Now, you told the people some of your next your future traveling dates, but please let them know how they can find you on social media, your websites, everything, where they could buy the album.
Thank you. Well, you can get all my albums on all of your favorite online retailers. So, Amazon, so on and so forth. You just basically put in Jj Thames, which is spelled like Thames, like the river. So you can pronounce it Thames, however, just pronounce it. Say my name, baby.
That's right.
Jj Thames. And you can Google that and all of my records and stuff will come up. My website is I am Jj Thames, once again spelled THAMES.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter. I'm on everywhere you can find me. I'm very active in social media. It is me taking care of my accounts as of now. You know how that goes.
Yes.
So, definitely reach out to me. I love to hear from everybody, and I love to hear your stories. I love to hear, see your posts and see your family and all that good stuff. And but it's all of my pages are Jj Thames. Only one that's different is my YouTube channel, which is Jj Thames Music. So if you put in Jj Thames, you're going to find me.
Dig it. Again, thank you. It was such an honor. Can't wait to come down here so we can meet you in person and get you on camera and have another great conversation about you, your life, and music.
I look forward to seeing you, and I look forward to hearing something about you, too.
Oh, soon. Thank you. You sure will.
All right. Have a great day. Thank you so very much.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You heard it here, folks. We're about to have a station ID, then you know what's happening.